One is an early 2000s cult classic on the dangers of clicks. The other is basically that, but as a musical to, shall we say, mixed results? Mean Girls. They Remade It.
On the floors of Tokyo, down in London town to go. With the record selection and the mirror's reflection, I'm a dancing with myself. When there's no one else inside, in the crowded, lonely night. Well, I wait so long for my love vibration, and I'm dancing with myself. Oh, 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 dancing with myself. Oh, 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 dancing with myself. Well, there's nothing to lose and there's nothing to prove, and I'm dancing with myself. Oh, 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 oh.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
And also,
I'm back.
my now fiance, Hannah, is joining us for this year's finale. Because, you know, this kind of seemed like her jam. I'm pretty sure you actually requested this movie.
I did. I told Stuart, I said, please do Mean Girls. And so he was able to convince Jake to do Mean Girls. And so now we're here.
Well, it only makes sense. I mean, I have familiarity with both of these movies. I saw the remake, the musical remake in theaters. So, you know, I at least have some passing knowledge as it comes to going into it. And we had to have you on this episode, too. What is it? You're a recovering mean girl in recovery. Is that right?
What?
Oh, my interview notes are all sorts of mixed up.
Is that a reference to something? I'm not sure.
No, I was just kidding. It's not a reference to anything. I was just playing around.
Are you?
Yes, I'm just such a bitch.
Yeah. Are you implying that my fiance is a mean girl?
No.
No comment.
My mother's name is Regina, so
Oh, is that true?
maybe that is true, and maybe that just comes naturally.
Oh dear God.
But no, I kid. You're very lovely. So
Thanks, Jake.
Let's deflect to a different question, why don't we? Yeah, I suppose I should throw it to you, Jacob. What have you been watching in this little interim in the period of this final episode, other than end of your talk, but that's a whole other thing.
honestly, not a lot, just because we have not, due to compressed schedules, we've recorded a lot in the past couple weeks, so I haven't had much time to, you know, go out and see things or engage. I still have a couple things in the theater while they're still in the theater that I need to see. But I just have not had the opportunity. The one thing I did see, which I teased in the last episode or the episode before, is I was able to catch White Christmas in theaters as part of their 70th anniversary celebration.
Ooh.
Which was nice. You know, it's for the season, and it has a little bit of ties to what we're doing today, it being a musical itself. There's some similarities in more ways than one. It plays really well on the big screen because of the way it was shot. So it's I think Leonard Maltin even did an intro to the movie, as he does for a lot of the flashback stuff, and he was saying that the way it was shot was at Vitaphone at the time, that the picture quality holds up regardless of what medium or what format you put it into, because it was shot horizontally instead of vertically, which most other films were done at the time. So it looks great. As a musical, it's been forever since I've seen this one, but it doesn't hold up too well, just because a lot of the songs are really stagnant and they don't drive anything. You can give it some semblance of a pass, because the whole purpose of it is putting on a show and show business. So the musicals are being performed on a stage in the movie, so it makes sense that they aren't going to drive a lot. But the movie's just constantly slowing down to a crawl so that they can do musical numbers on the stage. And you're like, we just get back to the story. So it fluctuates between being perfectly fine and a bit of a drag.
Still, yeah, that feels like kind of a running theme in a lot of musicals of that day. Sadly. Where they just kind of like, hey, let's just have a little sidebar for a bit and just have these little fun song and dance acts and then do all the story completely outside of that.
Yeah, which is, that's to be expected at the time, I guess. This being 1954, I guess, it's right in the middle of the time where movie musicals were still in their heyday. It wasn't until the late 60s that they really started to die. At least in the movies, anyways. So,
and there's definitely still plays and musicals and stuff that are just better adapted for the stage. And I think White Christmas is one of those for sure. I saw a local production of it last year, and it was significantly better on stage than I remember the movie being.
Mm.
Okay, that's perfect to know then. 'Cause I totally get that I get that feeling. And hey, there's some similarities to be made between that and what we're talking about today. But I don't want to get ahead of myself at all. I will throw the question back in your direction. I guess I'm talking to two people on the same the same voice channel. So either of you or both of you, what you've been watching?
Well, I mean, we do also live in the same home, so a lot of it's bleed over. But to be fair, there hasn't been a ton, if I remember correctly. We were still playing Grounded and such, which isn't watching anything, obviously, but we're still playing Grounded together a lot, as much as I've been able to in the last few days, because I have been tired. Just that time of the year. I've still been playing that Nine Souls game that I told you about last time. Mm-hmm. Less consistently, but it's... I'm still not great at... I'm still not great at the kind of like Souls-like ones where like it's all meant to be like parrying and being good at fighting. I mainly just kind of run in and panic and like, and sometimes I come out victorious. I'm like, oh, cool, I won. So, that's been more of the back burner though, because I have been recently playing the new Indiana Jones video game.
The Great Circle.
The Great Circle, yes. It has been pretty stellar. I'm a very big fan of 2 of the Indiana Jones movies, as most people who've seen them are. So it does a pretty dang good job of actually recreating the feeling of the films, the good ones. It's not a whole lot I can really say beyond that, mainly because like it's a lot of very spoilery territory to even get into it. It just suffices to say, feels like I'm playing the movie, which is a very good compliment for it.
That's great.
I suppose I should go to my better half to remind me if I've forgotten anything, because it's been a weird couple of weeks.
No, it's definitely just been a long couple of weeks, and I also really haven't consumed a lot of media in like preparation for the holidays and things like that. I'm sure you guys have touched on it, but I saw Wicked twice in theaters. Oh. Somebody who is a big movie lover and a big musical lover. And I thought it was a very good adaptation of the musical.
Oh yeah, I did see Wicked. I saw it with her. That was it.
I could tell that you really liked the movie too. I mean, I liked your Letterboxd review. Wicked being one of the things that I still have to see while it's still in the theater. There's like 4 things that's like, oh, I need to see 4 things before the end of the year. Well, I do that, but
and I would go see Wicked as soon as possible because they're getting ready to start doing the sing-alongs on Christmas Day.
Oh yeah, that.
So, and I know you're not into that. I'm going to go to one because that's totally up my alley, but I know that's not your vibe, and so I'd highly recommend seeing it sooner rather than later.
All right, I'll definitely have to. But yeah, like I was saying, you must really like it then to see it twice because it's close to 3 hours. Isn't it? It's a commitment.
It is. And this is not spoilery. It's been all over the internet. They actually take the stage musical, which is about 2.5, 3 hours, and they split it into 2 movies. So this movie is only act 1 of the stage musical, and it's already like 2.5, 3 hours long. I don't think that they added anything too crazy. It didn't feel like 2.5 hours in the theater. I definitely think it's worth a watch for people who like musicals, who like Wicked. I love Wicked. I've seen it 3 times on the stage. I've seen it in New York. I've seen it touring. But I also think people who are just fans of The Wizard of Oz or aren't familiar with the story of Wicked or really familiar with The Wizard of Oz, I still think that they would enjoy it. And I still think there's a lot to pick up for fans of The Wizard of Oz and people who like musicals in general.
I will say that one would be a difficult one to follow if you haven't at least seen The Wizard of Oz, just because it calls on a lot of details of like, you gotta at least know who the Wicked Witch is. So, which I guess if you've at least heard anything about Wizard of Oz, it's good enough. So, but yeah, I also enjoyed it. Thank you for seeing it a second time with me.
And I'm going to be seeing it a third in theaters.
Okay. Fair.
Will you be going to the sing-along, Stu?
No, I will not. Hannah will be going with another friend.
Okay.
He hears enough of me singing it at home. He doesn't need to also go to the sing-along.
It's less that and mostly just hearing the snippets from TikTok. The same repeated bits of one song or another, or like bits from the trailer.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
But yeah, I think that kind of is our sum up of everything we've seen. Like I said, like you also said, it's been a shorter period of time since the last one. And also, it's been very busy and I've been very tired. So... what do you want from us, people?
I've been a little tired too, but I'm trying to, we're making through, we're getting through it. So, but yeah, this might be the shortest, one we've been watching,
good Lord,
in a long time, just because we haven't.
Yeah, really. I mean, like we also haven't rambled as much at the beginning as we typically do, whatever the hell's going on in our immediate lives. Mm-hmm. But as it turns out, everyone knows what the hell's going on in our immediate lives. It's the Christmas time, and shit's busy. So,
Holidays keep us busy.
what a great way to have a finale episode for the year.
Oh boy.
Well, speaking of awkward segues, I suppose that leads us as unceremoniously as possible to Mean Girls.
You've done it again.
Oh, God, I gotta do synopses.
It's a cautionary tale of fear and lust and pride based on actual events where people die.
No one died, but how far would you go to be popular and hot? Would you resist temptation?
No, you would not. Just admit it. Sometimes mean is what you are. Mean is easier than nice, and no mean can take you far. Maybe this will make you.
So, for your listening pleasure this time around, the lovely Hannah will be doing the synopsis. I'll go and run through the main cast and the directorial groups. The 2004 original Mean Girls is made up of a cast of Lindsay Lohan as Katie Heron, Rachel McAdams as Regina George, Tina Fey as Miss Sharon Norbury, Tim Meadows as Mr. Ron Duvall, Amy Poehler as Mrs. June George, Anna Gasteyer as Betsy Heron, Lacey Chabert as Gretchen Wieners, Lizzie Chaplin as Janice Ian, Daniel Franzese, we'll go with that, as Damian Leigh, Neil Flynn as Mr. Chip Heron, Jonathan Bennett as Aaron Samuels, Amanda Seyfried as Karen Smith, and Rajiv Surendra as Kevin Napur. Jesus Christ. I am a white man. I very much apologize. The film is directed by Mark Waters, screenplay by Tina Fey. It's based on the book Queen Bees and Wannabes by Rosalind Wiseman, and it's produced by Lorne Michaels.
After being homeschooled for her entire life and having spent the last 12 years in Africa, 16-year-old Katie Heron begins her first day at North Shore High School. She has trouble making friends and is put down by teachers on her first day. She eventually befriends outcasts Janice Ian and Damian Leigh, who explain the school's various cliques, warning her about the plastics, the insecure Gretchen Wieners, the dim-witted Karen Smith, and the ruthless Queen Bee Regina George. Katie is unexpectedly invited to join the plastics. Janice hopes to use it to collect information on Regina, whom she accuses of ruining her life. Later that day, Katie becomes infatuated with her classmate Aaron. Gretchen warns her that that's Regina's ex-boyfriend and that he is off limits. Regina discovers Katie's infatuation with Aaron and tells Katie she does not care about their relationship. Despite Janice's insistence that Regina is evil, Katie comes to enjoy hanging out with the group at the mall and writing insulting remarks about their classmates and teachers in a diary called The Burn Book. However, at a Halloween house party, instead of talking to Aaron on Katie's behalf, Regina kisses him in front of her and resumes their relationship. Feeling betrayed, Katie fully commits to Janice's plan to ruin Regina's life. Over the following months, Katie, with Janice and Damien's help, manages to turn Gretchen against Regina and trick her into revealing her secrets, break up Regina's relationship with Aaron, and spend time with him by pretending to need math tutoring, and cause her to gain weight by giving her high-calorie snack bars under the pretense that they are diet food. After violating the plastics dress code rules by wearing sweatpants, the only thing that fit her, Regina is banished and Katie becomes the new Queen Bee. With her parents out of town, Katie throws a house party. She drunkenly admits to Aaron that she does not actually need math tutoring. He renounces her as being no better than Regina. Janice angrily confronts Katie for throwing a party instead of attending her art show and declares that she has become as plastic as she pretended to be. Meanwhile, Regina is enraged to discover Katie's sabotage and pastes her own photo in the burn book to frame Katie, Karen, and Gretchen. Regina distributes photocopies of the book through the hallways, inciting chaos. Principal Duvall and math teacher Mrs. Norbury gather the female junior students in the gym to talk through their social issues. When Janice reveals her plan against Regina to the students' cheers, Regina furiously storms out, and while confronting an apologetic Katie, she is struck by a school bus, fracturing her spine. After realizing a comment she wrote in the burn book has framed Miss Norbury as a drug dealer, Katie decides to take full responsibility for the book, becoming a social pariah. To earn extra credit, Katie joins the school mathletes at the state finals, answering the tiebreaker correctly to win the championship. The team arrives at the spring fling dance, where Katie is unexpectedly elected queen. She breaks the plastic tiara and distributes the pieces to others in the crowd, makes peace with those she had wronged, and shares a slow dance and a kiss with Aaron. As senior year begins, the plastics have disbanded. A fully recovered Regina joins the lacrosse team to channel her anger. Gretchen joins an Asian clique, and Karen becomes the school weather girl. Reflecting on the relative social peace that has taken over North Shore High, Katie notices a trio of new, junior plastics and wonders how long they will last as she imagines them being hit by a school bus.
It's like she was born for this, ladies and gentlemen.
It was amazing.
Thank you. Can you tell I have a degree in education?
Can we tell you also do theater?
That's beside the point.
Jumping forward to the 2024 remake, which is basically one for one, except for the very notable fact that it's a musical now. So that's something. We'll run through the cast with Anjali Rice, I'm going to assume that's how it's pronounced, as Katie Heron, Renee Rapp as Regina George, Alii
Carvalho.
thank you, as Janice
Emma Ike.
Thank you. Jaquel Spivey as Damian Hubbard. Avantika Vandanapu as Karen Shetty. B.B. Wood as Gretchen Wieners. Christopher Briney as Aaron Samuels. Jenna Fisher as Miss Heron. Busy Phillips as Mrs. George. Tina Fey as Miss Norbury, again. And Tim Meadows as Mr. Duvall, again. Additionally, including a cameo from Lindsay Lohan. The directorial group is made up of Samantha Jane and Arturo Perez Jr. as the directors. Screenplay, again, by Tina Fey. Once again, based on the Queen Bees and Wannabes by Rosalind Wiseman, and produced by Lauren Michaels and Tina Fey. Like I said, don't think there's actually any major differences between plot lines that I can think of.
No, there really isn't any major differences, except that, like Stuart said, it is a musical. And also, it's not a one-for-one remake in that they modernized Mean Girls.
Yes.
So instead of taking place in 2004, like the original, it very clearly takes place in the early 2020s, with the introduction of like cell phones and social media and things like that.
Lots of TikTok framing devices.
Oof.
Dear God, help us. That does us for Synopses. Surprisingly easy this time around, mostly because I didn't have to read it. Thank you, Hannah.
You're welcome.
We should all be so lucky.
Oh, man.
I'll just come in and I'll just read the plot synopses every time, and then you guys can just continue the podcast.
Just-
Oh, wow. our own just dedicated voiceover.
Not a bad gig.
I will pay you with more of what I already give you.
I mean, that sounds like a deal.
Yay! Anyway, full circle?
Yeah, full circle. All right. Very small. Very small this time around.
We've had some small ones recently.
We have. Well, the last one we did was a nightmare, so a bit of a break.
No, not that one, but prior to that.
Yeah. Only one for the remake. But I'll go through the couple that we have for the original Mean Girls first. Firstly, the obvious one, Lindsay Lohan, who played Katie or Caddy in Mean Girls. She was, like you had said, Stuart, she was the quiz master at the math competition in Mean Girls 2024 as well, in a little cameo. We last saw her as Anna Coleman in the remake of Freaky Friday she did with Jamie Lee.
Oh, yeah. Which is also getting another remake.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
okay, overdue sequel, technically, but still.
They've gone to that well a number of times. I think there's technically like 3 others that we could do, but...
Oh, yeah.
Moving on. We have Amy Poehler, who was Mrs. George in Mean Girls, Regina's mother. She was also Molly Gilchrist in 2003's Shortcut to Happiness.
I can't remember that one.
I feel like I remember Shortcut to Happiness very well, but I do not remember her in it. That's the Devil and Daniel Webster one that Alec Baldwin did.
Yes.
Bad CGI car hitting Dan Aykroyd and blasting him through a restaurant wall or whatever.
Yep, yeah, I remember now. Kind of had to be reminded of that.
We have Laura de Carteret, who was Mrs. Weddle in Mean Girls. That's fun. And she was Weddle, a politician in Washington in the 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead, the Zack Snyder one.
Okay. Couldn't even place that one.
Daniel,
you give me 100 years and I wouldn't be able to place it.
That's all right. Washington politician, not a name, not a character name.
Yeah.
Daniel Franzese.
It doesn't even take place in Washington.
Daniel Francis was Damien.
Yeah, sure.
In Mean Girls 2004. He was also a National Guardsman in 2005's War of the Worlds.
Goodness gracious,
Indeed. And finally, for the 2024 Mean Girls, we have John Hamm, who was Coach Carr, quite noticeably. He was also Michael Grenier in The Day the Earth Stood Still from 2008. So all remakes. All of these people the only original that most of them have been in is Mean Girls. Everything else they've been in on for the purposes of this show, remake.
I mean, how inconsiderate of them to not consider us before they even knew we existed, or could have known, or would have cared.
Yes. Well, it also helps that none of them are like 90. But yeah, that's it for Full Circle. I will wash my hands, dust my hands of this. The end of the 2024 Full Circle as we know it.
Hooray! You are allowed to rest for another, I don't know, about a month and a half.
Roughly.
You get to enjoy your holiday season without worrying about the Full Circle.
Oh, finally, maybe Stuart will give me a little more as well as a reward.
Oh, maybe he will.
Oh God, this is taking a turn. What sort of relationship is this?
But yeah, I guess I'll kick it off.
Sure, go for it. I know technically I didn't read the synopses, but I'll still take the break.
Just very quickly, it's so yeah, like I said at the top, I've seen both of these before. It had been a while since I saw the 2004 Mean Girls. I was definitely probably not even high school, probably middle school, junior high was the last time I saw this. So it's been a while. But the 2024 Mean Girls I saw in the theater when it was out, a very empty theater, noticeably.
Oh, yeah.
No one was there. And I'll just read.
How about that?
I'll just read a brief snippet from the Letterboxd review that I made. Felt so old watching this, I could feel myself turning to dust in the theater. This is so inordinately based around social media and phones and TikTok. It's wild. It's not just a modern updating. A lot of the time, the like TikTok or instant messaging or whatever the hell is the framing device for a lot of these songs and attempts to drive forward narrative through montages. And it's like, oh my god, I'm so glad that I didn't have to participate in this growing up. It just seems like I know that's like old man yells at cloud 100%. And if I grew up in this age, I would be perfectly fine and my brain would be adept to understand it. But just watching it unfold on screen twice now, I'm like, I could not keep up. There's no way I could keep up if I had to do this. So
it does kind of inadvertently open the way to like the idea of a pretty major comparison between the two. That being, the idea of image as a thing is somehow way more pronounced nowadays than it was in 2004, simply because of social media. And yet, at times, I still feel like the people in the 2004 one are even judgier, which is weird to think about, and I don't know how to place my finger on that. Like, I think just the fact that the burn book had to exist in the first one, because it's like, they weren't going to be posting to social media or anything. Meanwhile, they kind of had to justify its existence in the remake, where they had to be like, oh, we made this whenever, like, during the week where we weren't allowed to have phones. I was like, you did all this in a week? Are you for real? Like, come on. And
also, if that justification feels very slapdash, and it's just like, remember we did this before my mom took away my Tumblr.
Fate worse than death.
She cut down the internet.
Or a freedom, a delivery to freedom, depending on your angle.
More often than not, the latter. And this is one of those. So I'm definitely going to be leaning on you a lot more for this one, Hannah, as I have in the past when it comes to musicals, because I am a big musical person, but a big movie musical person. And outside of that, my purview is limited. Every view that I have is coming purely from a theatrical, like a film narrative standpoint. I like a lot of the instrumentality of the songs in the 2024 remake, and I think Renee Rapp has a great voice. Just the first instance of her singing in the cafeteria, I think, is fantastic. But it's not, for me, it's not doing the story any favors. And more often than not, I think it sort of stalls the movie. It's not to its benefit.
Yeah, so I will talk a little bit about the history of the Mean Girls musical, and I think that will kind of help feed into why the movie was the way that it was. So Tina Fey brought the idea of the Mean Girls musical up in like 2013, so about 9 years after the movie came out. And it didn't debut on Broadway until 2017. So they workshopped it for about 4 years before they officially brought it to Broadway. It did really well on Broadway. It was nominated for like 12 different Tony Awards. I don't believe it won any of them. But it came to really good reception. And I think Broadway right now is really in a time where it's really hard to get original work going. So a lot of the things that we've seen on Broadway are based on books or movies. So like right now, there's a Great Gatsby musical. I think it actually just closed. There's like so many different things that are coming from other pieces of media. And so I think in that niche, Mean Girls fit in really well because it is such a cult classic from the early 2000s. Then when COVID hit in 2020, it had closed down. Going back to Renee Rapp, there's this like high school level theater awards called the Jimmy Awards. And high schoolers from all over the country go to New York, they perform and they compete. And so Renee Rapp was actually the winner of the 2018 Jimmy Awards. And the winners of the Jimmy Awards get a Broadway contract. So she actually played Regina George on Broadway until it had closed down.
That's great.
So they absolutely brought her back. Tina Fey loved her for Regina George again. And she was actually really worried that producers wouldn't want her. But I think vocally, she's extremely talented. I think personality-wise, I think it really fits Regina George. So I think that she was a really good fit. And I also think Ali Cravalho was a great fit. Having a musical background, having a Disney background, she was Moana, I think really benefited her. I think what really made this a drawback is they cast a lot of people who are not musical people. And that's a big drawback that a lot of movie musicals have, is that they're not casting Broadway actors. They're not casting actors who are familiar with musical theater. They're casting Hollywood actors who then have to learn how to do those things and don't already have those skills. And so a lot of the actors that they cast for this movie are not musical theater people, and so it really made it a lot harder to pull in a lot of the music and stuff from the Broadway version. They cut a lot of the Broadway songs out and re-edit in songs because they did not have that talent to be able to bring that to the movie.
I mean, I can definitely see that, especially the mass editing, because some of these songs, there's a distinction between the songs too, where some of them feel like really planned and coordinated with the narrative, and then others just feel sort of slapdashed into the project, which maybe that's where it's
Revenge
coming
Party
from.
sticks out for me.
Revenge Party sticks out as one that they replaced. That's actually one of the...
No, as one that just feels like it doesn't integrate well with the plot. As it's just kind of like, it's just there having a whole piece and like a big planned out thing. But it doesn't really... It seems like if you cut that from the piece, it wouldn't actually mean anything. Meanwhile, things like Regina George's introduction or like Mean or that sort of thing.
Which I'm actually very disappointed because from the musical is a song called Meet the Plastics. And Gretchen and Karen also have bits that they sing in that song, and they fully cut them for the movie, which I feel almost like dehumanizes them. Like, only Regina is important. Karen and Gretchen do not matter. And like the whole plot, which is not true. Like, it's a whole thing about like cliques and friendship and things like that. And so the fact that they fully just cut those from the movie is very disappointing.
That definitely kind of rings as notable throughout it. Because, yeah, I do. That does kind of feel like it, where, like you said, Jake, a lot of pieces feel, like actually integral to the plot and everything. And then a lot of things seem inconsequential. Like a lot of songs feel inconsequential. And the fact that, they cut out entire portions of one of the major defining songs, that does it no favors. I feel like it's just kind of really only making it harder for themselves.
Yeah. And specifically with the two of them, I wonder if they were just trying to save themselves as much as possible from having to worry about folks that couldn't sing, which I don't know how true that would even be. For Bebe Wood, I don't know Bebe Wood, from a hole in the ground as far as other media is concerned, so maybe she does have some semblance of stage presence. But Avantika is primarily a Bollywood actress. The only thing I even know her from outside of this is Tarot, that god-awful horror movie from this past summer. So I don't really know what the singing capabilities of either of them are, but yeah, a lot of this feels like it was all chopped to hell, and I don't know what that's servicing either, because the movie it's almost 2 hours long. Yeah,
this did feel... this one was a whole lot longer than the original, huh? The original was surprisingly brief whenever I got right down to it. I was actually kind of surprised by that.
And I think the pacing of the original, despite it taking over a year, I thought was really good. And I think that the musical version really cut pieces in and out, so it didn't flow as well together and didn't really make sense. And the timing was, like, as somebody who loves the original movie and like is very familiar with it, the movie musical, like, I love a lot of the songs. I think it's really fun. I don't think it just really meets the same timeline as, kind of like you guys said, kind of hacked together, slashed together to put this movie out, rather than like trying to truly bring an ode to the original.
Yeah, that's true. Something that interests me, as long as we're talking about the flow and the pacing, is that the 2024 Mean Girls is so much longer than the original, which is funny because a lot of that is because the songs aren't integrated. They're additive. So it's not actually, it's like we have the original movie and then we stuck songs into it to make it longer, and then other places they're like, okay, we have to rush through things that the original movie focused on because the songs are making us run out of time. We were only allotted so much time that we can pay for broadcast in our theatrical release, and WB or Paramount is going to get pissed and start throwing things. Like, for example, the party scene, the first party scene, I should say.
Halloween party.
Yes, the Halloween party. Thank you. It's like, well, I have so many things happen, but it's more concise in the original, and so you're not there as long because it just sort of, it sets up what's happening, you see what's happening, and then you move on from there. Meanwhile, those events still happen in the 2024 film, but there's also this added level of numerous musical segments. We have a lead into it with more TikTok shit. We have the song that integrates into the beginning of the dance party, and then we have Regina's song near the end of that Halloween party. Later on in the movie, when you get to the the confrontation where Katie admits to Tim Meadows that she wrote about Tina Fey's character in the Byrne book. In the remake, it's just like, okay, there's no investigation. She's just going, we got to do this. She admits to it before the principal even says anything. Get out of there. It's like 3 minutes shorter of a scene because it feels like they're running out of time. They're like, we have to wrap things up.
It also didn't help, and this might just be a personal axe grind thing, but as far as the Halloween party one goes, and a few notable scenes throughout the film, they also take a lot more time to just really blatantly sexualize what are meant to be high school kids, which at a certain point I was like, okay, this is getting weird. It's just, and I know that's kind of that's the point in the original musical, and it's supposed to be a bit more pointed about it, but it really kind of feels like they're reveling in it in the 2024 one. Like the whole fact of like having the sexy costumes thing, which again brought up in the original, but it's pretty brief ultimately. That was pretty notable. Of like, man, this is taking a while for this scene, huh?
Yeah, we get to see a lot of fun things happening, and a joke about sexy cancer that takes a little too long.
Which that one is not. That is straight from the musical itself, the stage adaptation. That was not added for the movie.
That definitely seems like a bit that would be funnier on stage. Like I feel like with like being able to have a drawn out scene like that does feel funnier when people are performing it. But just seeing it like in the film, it's like, all right, let's pick.
Also, as a sidebar, when I assume other characters are still doing things for the dance number on stage, so it feels more like an aside, as opposed to it being more personal in the movie because the camera has to follow these two characters as they're having what is supposed to be a humorous argument. But maybe we're looking too much into that. We're putting too much stock in the Karen and Gretchen character. This is not Waiting for Godot. I won't treat it as such.
Yeah, fair. It's waiting for Katie or whatever the hell it would be.
The another thing which I think I brought up on the podcast when I first watched this movie, that actually this will help if I know whether this is from the original musical or not, but the narrator of the first film is Katie, is Lindsay Lohan, which is taken straight from the first person narrative of the book, as far as I know. I haven't read it myself, but in the remake, we have Damien and Janice acting almost as like the Greek muses. And
the chorus.
Yeah, the chorus that is sort of accompanying this, which a chorus more or less makes sense for a musical. More often than not a play, but musical is fine. But is that something that the Mean Girls musical had? Was these two characters goofing around as the substitute narrators for the piece?
I haven't actually seen the full stage production,
okay.
So I don't know if it. I don't believe it starts with them narrating it. I don't think it ends with that. Like, I don't believe that is part of it. But again, I haven't seen it. I think it is a little bit more true to the story in that, like, it starts with Katie, and I think that narrative piece was added in because of the social media aspect of the movie.
Is that opening bit, "This is a cautionary tale," is that in the original soundtrack?
I think it's actually later in the show. I don't think that's the opening song, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, gotcha. Because like if that's the case, then yeah, that pretty much
I'll
would
look it up
define
right now. Give me 2 seconds.
Oh dear Lord, we're in the internet age. We can do that.
Oh, I'm gonna get on
I can
TikTok.
just look up. I'm actually looking at Spotify because they'll have the album on there.
Yeah, because like that would kind of be the definer of like if that's not the first one.
Oh, I lied. It is a cautionary tale. That is
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
So, like I guess I would assume throughout the original play, then yeah, they would kind of be the pseudo Greek chorus. For as much as they do chime in, they really only chime in at the beginning and the end, which like, you know, and honestly, that's just kind of how Greek chorus would have worked back in the day. With the literal Deus Ex Machina at the end. Me throwing in my little Greek play knowledge. But yeah, that at least makes sense. But also, that does sort of. I don't know how I necessarily feel about those two characters in the 2024 one. They're kind of hit and miss throughout it for me. Like I think they kind of not necessarily outstay their welcome, but it feels like it becomes more central to them than it does to Katie and the plastic story. Whereas it very much feels like, you know, it's Katie's story through and through in the original.
I feel like the remake really centralizes on like Janice and Regina's plot line of like them being friends and then something happening to ruin their friendship and then they kind of split apart. I feel like that is a much more major, like, obviously that's one of the pieces of the climax of the original is that, you know, Katie is trying to do this for Janice and ends up becoming friends and then therefore like replacing Regina. Obviously that's a huge plot point in the original, but I feel like it was definitely brought more to the forefront for the musical. And I think a lot of that leans itself again into the music. I feel like if you only did music about what Katie was doing, you'd have a very short, very boring musical. So I think to move a musical plot along, of course you're going to add in extra songs and things from the other characters. But at what cost are you ruining the original plot of your story?
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. So long as it doesn't detract too much, which I guess is the thing, because them being this sort of Greek chorus style thing, it doesn't necessarily bother me because, like you were saying, Stu, it's like the beginning, the end, and then occasionally in the middle, and it's not all that intrusive. It's just strange because it does in a way take away from this story being sort of the rise and fall and rise again of the Katie character. But I think I would be thinking about it less if that stuff was by the wayside and then other characters still got their song moments, because they're still characters that we're following around and that are used in the plot, whether it's motivation for Katie or whether they're means to an end at getting back at Regina. I think of primarily Gretchen's song in the closet near the beginning of the movie, which is a short little number set to this musical box tune, and then the fuck everybody romp that Janice has near the end, right before the bus scene. I think those are the two big standouts of like character focused songs, I guess.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of like very distinct ones other than, again, Regina George's one, and that's kind of more to set the stakes than anything else.
And I think there's definitely songs. I mean, Katie is the main character, so there's definitely like "Stupid with Love" and things like that are centered around her as well. Which also, this is going to appease my musical theater people out there. The movie version is so different than the musical, and it is not nearly as good at all.
Which one?
The movie version.
No, which song?
"Stupid with Love."
Okay, yeah. It's like, yeah, I was gonna say that even watching it, I was like, this kind of feels. I feel like this, like I wasn't even really sure what we were supposed to be doing with it. It was just kind of felt like it was in the background to everything else going on.
Yeah, in the musical, it's very like upbeat. She's kind of like this perky high schooler, like her first love for the first time. Like she's so excited. And then in the movie, they made it more of a ballad. And I don't know if that's because of like Angori or like they just try to fit it in with more of a movie vibe than a musical vibe. And then you also have things like Revenge Party, which are like very upbeat and very exciting. And then like even Regina's song, it just feels very lackluster compared to the original.
I almost keep forgetting that there also is just the 2004 one just kind of hanging out there, which I'll just say it. I was kind of mixed about it in general. If I just gotta look, man.
All of your millennial women listeners are going to be very disappointed by that take.
I mean, like, oh no, the millennial guy is like, I don't get the hype around Mean Girls. And considering the fact that it is a film that I probably didn't even need to watch and still knew everything about, simply because it's been quoted to me to death in my entire life.
So what? Someone said you go Glen Coco to you once, and you're like, okay, well, I know what that movie is.
I mean, like, it wasn't that. It was someone said you go Coco, and I was like, oh, what's that? And then they explained it, and then they kept explaining it, and then 3 other people kept explaining it, and then people kept saying the line over and over. Multiply that over the course of that entire film for the last 20 years. Yeah, I think I've got a pretty good idea of what that movie was about.
It sounds like
every time October 3rd pops up, I just see the same GIFs pop up online. I'm like, yes, okay.
It's October 3rd.
Yeah. So I sound more bitter than I need to be, obviously.
I think that part of that also leans into, this is very clearly a movie written for early 2000s teen girls.
Well, yes.
Like, that is kind of the whole point of the movie. So I could see why it wouldn't appeal to you.
I mean,
his mid to late 20s male.
I mean, it's not just, it's not just the me now. It was me back when also I was a teenage boy, as it were, which again, it's pitched towards, teenage girls. But when it comes to the cult classics things, and when people kind of bring it up as much as they do, at a certain point, I kind of expect to do something for me, but I was like, no, this is kind of just okay. I think everyone had hyped it up so much, I think my brain just didn't really associate anything with it anymore. And seeing it actually from beginning to end, rather than just clips reposted or people doing reactions to things or what have you, I was just kind of like, oh yeah, it's just a movie. It's not a cultural phenomenon. It's just a film.
It's not a cultural phenomenon. Tell that to all the people who wear pink on Wednesdays.
Yeah, that's their choice.
Because of the movie. Well,
it's just kind of, it's not really a never meet your heroes thing. It's not even necessarily never meet your enemies. It was just never meet your person that's talked about every day in your class for 20 years.
I mean, I've never had a problem with the movie at all. It's not a movie that ever like directly spoke to me or anything, because I don't I very obviously don't relate to the core subject matter, and I honestly not even to the high school clickiness, because I was in a very, again, I always say the same line when I bring this up. I'm like, I'm sure it was happening like behind people's back, but my high school never really felt that clicky. Everyone sort of did their own thing, but so to that end, there wasn't a lot for me to take away from this movie. But even back in the day when I watched it, up into this past week when I rewatched it, I still think it's really funny. I think it's a solid script with great performances, and I think it has good line deliveries too. I think that Damien is a funny character. I think that Tim Meadows is great as always, and it was an interesting choice. I can see why Tina Fey reprised her role in the movie. It is very interesting that Tim Meadows came back. I know the two of them are old SNL friends, but his energy is much depleted because he is a much older man. I think he might have actually broke his hand before the filming of this movie or something. I don't think we ever get an explanation for what that is. At first, I thought it was like a carpal tunnel or arthritis brace. But the more it's shown off,
that's what they alluded to from the original, was that he had arthritis or something, and that's why he was wearing the brace in the first one.
Yeah, in the first one, he brings up, "Oh, I got carpal tunnel," and she brings up that she got divorced over the summer.
Right. Okay, I didn't.
And so it's meant to be a carpal tunnel. At least in the original, it's meant to be a carpal tunnel thing.
Okay, that's good, because I didn't remember or pick up on the carpal tunnel line in the original. I sort of made that connection in the remake, but the more he was flashing it off, I was like, I come from a very heavy computer science field with a lot of people that get carpal tunnel. That doesn't look like it's probably a prop is what the thing is. And so I was like, what is this? What is that? So, okay. Which is fine. He's still old, and damn it, old people shouldn't be acting. No, that's not, that's not the takeaway.
Stance from Jake tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Jesus. Old people shouldn't be acting. My God.
You have tried to go after entire countries on this show before. And then
I resent that.
Anyway.
But I think, Jake, to go back to your point of, it being a lot of like SNL character. I mean, Amy Poehler's in it as Regina George's mom. Right. I mean, it's produced by Lorne Michaels. Like, that already right there should tell you that this is going to be very SNL heavy. And I feel like the comedy is very early 2000s SNL skit heavy. And I was telling Stuart earlier, I said this movie, like very many of the early to mid 2000s SNL skits, it's very quotable because it feels like one very big, long SNL skit.
I think I just realized why I'm not as big of a fan of the original. I'm not a big fan of SNL.
All right.
It's not me trying to be a point of pride like so many people do. It's never really been my jam.
I mean, that's fine. A lot of that depends on what SNL you've seen too, just because there's different phases of the show with different writers, and so you get a lot of different feelings, but this is firmly in that transitionatory period after the men's club had left that dominated the early to mid 90s of SNL, which is where you get your Sandlers and your Schneiders and your, so we're right out of that period, and we have more women and more people of color on the show, more than I think it was the biggest, the most diverse cast since the original 70s season, which had a surprising number of women as primetime players, but that's neither here nor there. So that is all to say that there are waves of SNL and different styles of humor and writing, and that's a good point, Hannah, because this is very of the time from an SNL TV perspective, because there is an other early aughts form of comedy that is a lot crasser and meaner and has not aged nearly as well. And thankfully, this does not fall into that.
We remember watching The Producers.
Oh God, yes, just one of many examples. The Producers.
This is one of the least homophobic early 2000s pieces we've seen in a while.
It's damn near the opposite of homophobic.
Honestly.
I won't say it's perfect, but damn. And
yeah, I mean, compared to the new one, it's definitely, not nearly as allied as the new one, but I think that it does a really good job of, first of all, I love a coming of age story, especially like a teenage, I related to that so hard when I was growing up, so I think maybe that's why I'm so biased and partial to Mean Girls. One, it's funny, and it's very quotable, but two, it was very relatable, and I think in between those very SNL moments that there are a lot of poignant of the end when Katie's breaking up the crown is like, everybody's a queen. Like, why are we bullying each other? There's no point. Like, we're all in the same place kind of vibe. So I think it does a really good balance of that. I definitely think there are some parts that have not aged nearly as well as I remember them aging when I was like in high school and early college. But I definitely think that it has held up a lot more than a lot of like other comedy pieces from that age, for sure.
Yeah, I still think, like I said earlier, I still think it's really funny. I think that the 2024, more often than not, the jokes that it sets up fall flat. Some of that is just the way that things are delivered, and other bits of it are just there's a lack of confidence. And I know I always harp on this with comedies especially, but there's just a lack of confidence in writers today.
I also think it relies too heavily on the original source material to back up a lot. Like, they didn't write anything new or original. They're ripping the jokes from the original where they don't quite fit in anymore.
Honestly, this whole movie just kind of feels like it just shuffled a bunch of cards together from the original and just kind of hoped it turned out okay.
Like Fetch, there's this
fine at times.
There's this weird thing with Fetch in the new movie where it's like she says, oh, it's from an old movie, which is like, you could take to be a reference like, oh yeah, there was an older version of Mean Girls where, Fetch was not, that's a very quotable line. She says it's Juno, and I think that's supposed to be a laugh, but I was like, oh, whatever. Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of like ways that they try to modernize those jokes where they just did not land at all. I was like, my brain just had an example of that, and it literally just fell flat of what was the point I was trying to make there. But
hey, welcome to the show. Honestly, that's 90% of my bits where I'm like, I'm going to start saying something, and by the end, I hope I'll find where I was going.
Oh, or even like in the Mathletes competition where Lindsay Lohan's like, this has only ever happened one time before. It's like, yeah, no shit, it happened in the original movie.
I get it.
Like, there's just so many points where they're referencing the original that you just can't replicate that at this point.
And she even said, Lindsay Lohan's character even makes a point of saying, I don't know your life. It's like, ha ha ha, it was your life at one point. We get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I am happy that Lindsay Lohan's doing better, though. That's nice.
Which, like, outside of the names of characters and everything, is this supposed to try to be like a tongue-in-cheek sequel, or is it just them just being like reference? Because, like, you could technically take it that way, since there are certain characters that carry over, like, the teacher and the principal.
It's not. It's literally just a remake with songs added in, modernized. It's not a sequel. It is literally just supposed to be.
I'm just saying it's funny. Like, the idea of this entire scenario had happened previously, Like, looking at it that way, I find it to be a lot more entertaining than it is. It's not what they intended, I'm sure, but still.
Mean Girls 2?
Oh, God, yeah, there is a sequel.
About that. I've never seen it.
I mean, I barely even remember it exists.
It was a TV movie. What are you going to do? Those things get buried instantly.
And I will say, just because we have done a lot of dogpiling to the remake, I will say to the remake's credit, I actually quite like how dramatic it's made the story by comparison, at least just with like the songs and everything. I mean, just even the moment where we see Regina George learn that like the snack bars are actually causing her to get fatter. Like the light shining on her and just rage on her face is like, holy crap. I've seen full budget dramatic films that don't have someone look that menacing. I think really all of it just hinges on Renee Rapp. Is it Renee Rapp?
Yeah, it's Renee Rapp.
It pretty much all hinges on her as Regina. I think she kind of carries it.
I was just about to say. Yeah. And I mean, first of all, I love Renee Rapp. She was my 4th top artist on Spotify this year. Her album is wonderful. So I'm a little bit biased, but I feel like this was definitely the Renee Rapp show with remakes of Mean Girls thrown in. So there were a lot of shots that were very reflective of the original Mean Girls. So going back to that scene where Katie's breaking the crown, where it's the undershot of her looking down at the crown, was almost ripped directly from that same scene with Lindsay Lohan from the '04 version. But then the scenes where like they're zooming in on Renee singing World Burn, I feel like it's very much in those scenes, this is Regina George's story, which I think is brilliant on the filmmaker's part to kind of lead into that. But it definitely does feel like this is Renee Rapp's show. Also with a lot of product placement thrown in. Just awful.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that.
I just think that to sort of bounce off of that, if we're praising the 2024, which I already praised Renee Rapp like 30 minutes ago, but if we're going to do more praising, the cinematography itself is just great. I think throughout the whole movie.
Absolutely.
Even if a moment or a song isn't working, like that fucking jungle song, I don't know the names of any of these songs, but there's this shot during that song or during Revenge Party where the camera like spins and does a 3. Like, it's something that you can do easily, because we know how to do it and we have had 100 years of learning how to do things like this. But to do it well and to have things sit decently in frame, good aspect ratio, good lighting, good coloring. Like, I mean, shout out to Bill Kirstein, who did the cinematography for this movie, because it's great. It makes it something that's watchable.
Oh, 10,000% for sure. And I know I keep harping on it. I'm also going to give it some good condolences. I think that trying to remake such iconic characters is a very hard thing to do. Like, it is very hard to make your own Regina George. It is very hard to make your own Karen. It's very hard to make, like, because people are going to be thinking about Rachel McAdams and Lacey Shaber and, you know, all these other things. But I think that a lot of the characters actually did a really good job or a lot of the actors did a really good job at making these characters their own characters versus just mimicking Lindsay Lohan or mimicking Rachel McAdams. I think they all did a really good job of bringing it and modernizing it to be new-ish characters kind of based on the other characters.
I agree. This is odd because it's kind of a tangent, but it just struck me.
Just doing tangents? What a concept.
Well, it just struck me while we were having that conversation, but for movie night recently, for our weekend movie nights, we just recently watched something that had Lacey Chabert in it. What was it?
It was Hot Frosty.
Oh.
Yeah,
She
that's
played the lead character.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Because I was sitting there and I was like, because it took me about halfway through the movie to realize it was her. Because, I mean, you look at like other iconic actresses in that movie, you know, you look at Lindsay Lohan, Tina Fey, I mean, even Amy Poehler over Lacey Chabert, you know, it's just, I was watching that movie and it took me till halfway through to realize, oh yeah, that's Gretchen Wieners. And I feel kind of bad reducing that actress to Gretchen Wieners, but I mean, that's one of her most iconic roles. Like even Amanda Seyfried even got additional things, like she got Mamma Mia, you know, she got other roles and things, but I feel like for her, Gretchen is kind of her big role that a lot of people will compare it to. But yeah, it was Hot Frosty.
I felt
yeah,
I felt bad not even recognizing her, but I mean she did a lot of TV, but nothing that I would have really known. Like the only thing that she did that I would have intensely known was the Wild Thornberrys, and that was just voicing the main character. Like she was not like that's not a face that I necessarily recognize. So I felt bad upon learning that information.
I just learned that information now, Jake, and I feel really bad about it.
I mean, yeah, like about her voicing in the Thornberrys, that's wild.
Oh yeah, well she got to work with Tim Curry. It's fine.
Oh yeah, fair. God bless him.
Yeah, she made it out okay, but yeah, it's funny because Lindsay Lohan, like I said, Lindsay Lohan, I'm glad that she's doing better. At least she seems to be doing better. That fucking Netflix movie that you watched, Stu, I didn't watch it myself. I took a brief glance and it looks downright rotten, but I'm just glad that she's doing things.
I mean, it's pretty harmless as a film, you know. I honestly just kind of like it just because of the setup that it has going on, and just like she's with this family and everything. I think they're very funny. Oh, who's the basically the matriarch of this family? Who's the actress who played the original Glinda in Wicked?
Kristen Chenoweth.
Yeah, her. She is the main like matriarch of this like uber rich, like super like flashy family, and it's like she just kills it the entire way through. It's honestly more her movie than Lohan's, but you know.
Well, it's because Kristen Chenoweth is an angel on this earth.
Yes.
Of an actress.
She plays a demon in the movie, which I'd say demon. She actually ends up being a very complex character. But it's a surprisingly good film for how it comes out the gate with. And I'm completely, talk about tangents. This is a complete tangent now. Lizzie Lohan was fine with it. I'm glad she's also doing stuff.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. I just thought it was funny. It's like, well, Lacey Chabert has a Netflix movie this year and it does not look great, but Lindsay Lohan also has a Netflix movie this year and apparently it's fine. So.
It was better than Hot Frosty.
What a reversal of fortune.
Yeah. Like it's honestly better. It's at the very least, it's not trying to do anything crazy like make a hot snowman human. Like it's anything less than that, and it's like, yeah, it's fine. It's like, they did nothing wrong.
Low bar.
Yeah, basically. Like this is as sign as anything that I don't know if I have any other points between either of these movies to say.
Well, I am curious as we potentially wrap things up, wind things down. Well, before we get into final thoughts and if anyone has anything additional, but does everyone have a favorite? Sure. I used to do this whenever we did a musical episode, but it got to the point where it was like, this musical sucked. I don't want to talk about it. But what was everyone's favorite number or favorite piece?
Ooh, I honestly liked World Burn. Basically anything with Regina George as the main lead, that was fun. But that one specifically, I think, was the most dramatic piece. So I think I'd probably go with that one.
I mean, that's my same answer. I really like the
shit.
initial setup song that Regina George has, and I mean, World Burn is just additive. You know, it takes elements of that and makes it more. So yeah, that was also my answer.
This is going to be very repetitive. I love World Burn, but I'm also going to change it up. And then again, this is reverting back to the musical. I love the original Meet the Plastics. I'm disappointed they cut Gretchen and Karen's bits out of them. I think Renee Ratt still does a wonderful job making it a solo number. I also do love Revenge Party. I think it's just fun and catchy. And I also really do enjoy I'd Rather Be Me, which is the song that Janice sings during like the women's in the gymnasium scene. Again, in the musical, it's much more powerful, but I still think that Ali'i Carvalho did a really great job with the number, despite it being kind of playfully weird in the movie.
Yeah, the fact that it kind of is just the moment right before, Regina George's Final Destination moment, which I saw that and I was like, wow, that's literally just a moment from one of the Final Destination movies.
That's like Final Destination 3, yeah. But
yeah, that's it, the third one.
I didn't even really think about that, but that kind of takes away from the impact of that moment. Unfortunately.
Yeah. It just kind of happens. Where it's like walking off and it's like, oh, they're going to talk about, bus. Okay.
Yeah.
That's happening now.
Which you could explain.
Which I also think kind of harpens. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that you could, if you wanted to, explain it away as the directors and producer being like, well, they already know the bus is coming because they're intimately familiar with the first Mean Girls, so let's change it up. Mean Girls 2004 is required reading going into the 2024 one as far as the directors and the producer are concerned.
What makes it a bad remake.
But sorry, Hannah, I stepped on your...
No, you're good. I was gonna revert back to the idea that the bus scene of Regina George getting hit by the bus is very early 2000s SNL comedy of like, oh, they're having this heated argument and here comes a bus hitting one of the characters.
It almost felt like a Monty Python bit, honestly. It's like, oh.
Replace the bus with a giant foot coming in horizontally.
Basically.
Exactly.
I'm trying to remember. There's some like flash animation from sometime in the early to mid 2000s where it basically just did that, just like of two cavemen blatantly doing a bit. It's like bland establishing dialogue, response that increases stakes of the situation, sudden violence, expectations are subverted. It's like, yeah, that's the early 2000s.
Well, I guess I will take the helm then and just say, are there any final thoughts that we have? I mean, I very firmly have shown that there are elements of the 2024 that I think work, but moreover, it does not. I would be interested I listened to some songs directly from the soundtrack after watching the movie, so I at least have that experience, but I would be curious to see the musical in its native environment at some point to sort of get that experience. But I think that 2004 is better written, better constructed, and funnier, which is hilarious considering 2024 is the exact same movie. It presents these same ideas and fails to deliver for various reasons that we've already talked about.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, neither of these movies are really for me, but if pressed, yeah. I think that kind of the idea of it would be for me is, would I watch either of these on my own again? Probably not. Would I watch either of these with other people again? I'd probably watch the 2004 one, yes. That one would probably be funny to watch with people who have a deeper relationship with it, like with Hannah. And I think it would just be more entertaining that way. I liked a lot of the remake, though. For as choppy as it was, it still felt competently made. At least, like you said, with cinematography and just the choreography of the songs and everything. They were all objectively good. It just didn't really make a great whole film. Is the sad part. So, sadly, that kind of knocks it down a touch.
I'm going to agree with both of you that the original 2004 Mean Girls film is better than the movie musical. However, my qualms with the movie musical lie with Hollywood in that if you are going to make a movie musical, please promote it as a movie musical. I feel like that was such a major drawback of this film is that unless you knew that Mean Girls had a Broadway musical, they did not advertise this as a movie musical. They advertised it as a remake of the movie, which led it to be very disappointing for a lot of people who don't like musicals and don't like movie musicals. So I think if you're going to go that route, you need to be open and honest about the material that you are pulling from. Like, yes, you're pulling from the original Mean Girls movie, but really you're pulling from the Broadway musical. And I think that if you want your movie to be successful and if you want your remake to be successful, you have to be honest about what type of movie it is going to be.
Yeah, they seemed real afraid of making this movie, didn't they? Or at least releasing it.
I think that Hollywood has had that apprehension towards musicals since the big failure in the 70s. If it's not an animated musical, they're definitely afraid that it's just going to tank at the box office. Even this Wicked movie that came out, a lot of the promotion, they were hiding the actual songs until like the end of the second trailer. And I'm like, okay, well, Mean Girls is one thing because people could go into it just thinking, oh, I remember the 2004 Mean Girls. Wicked is like, what, you gonna get people in there that are big fans of the original book and have been asleep for the past 15 years? Like, how are you gonna hide that Wicked is a musical? So Hollywood is just dense.
I think, and I would argue to your point that, like, yes, they hit a lot of it, but also they've done such a good job at saying, hey, Wicked is a musical based off of a Broadway musical that's been around for 20 years. That one's a lot harder to hide, I think. Like, yes, it's based off of a book, which is based off of a movie, which is based off of another book. And that's a whole other tangent that we can get into another time. But I think that it's hard. It was a lot harder to hide Wicked as a musical than it was to hide Mean Girls as a musical, because Wicked, yes, it came out as a book, but even the stage adaptation is wildly more tame than the book, the source material from the book. So I think Wicked's a good step in the right direction. I think Mean Girls was a very bad step in the wrong direction in terms of movie musicals, and I'd like to see I'm hoping Wicked kind of brings more light into, hey, movie musicals can actually be fun and good, but we actually need to promote them as such.
Exactly. Yes. We can forget about Mame and Dr. Dolittle. Like, we can do this.
We can have things like Chicago and Hairspray, but also like we have Les Mis and Mean Girls. Like,
Yeah.
we have to. I guess we have to find that balance eventually. Of we can go back to good movie musicals again. We can do it, but I think it's going to take a while for us to get there.
But you also,
and I think Mean Girls is very much the rule of that rule.
yes, but also if you're going to make these, you have to get you don't necessarily have to get the people from the original Broadway show, but it definitely helps. You should at least get people who can competently sing. Don't hire Russell Crowe and give him sheet music.
we have not forgotten.
But also, one last little thought about cameos. They did actually have now Renee Rapp was not the original Regina George on Broadway, but she did close it out on Broadway. They did actually have another one of the original Broadway actresses in the movie. Ashley Park, who plays Gretchen Wieners in the original Broadway musical, was the French teacher. And I'll just leave on that.
That's very
Nice.
cool. Did not know that.
That's some pretty concise points all around. I actually have a theoretical question for y'all this time around, unless, Jake, you have one that you wanted to posit, which it might be, if you do, it might be the same as me.
I came up with one before we started recording, but I realized that we had already done it before on a previous musical episode, and I was like, wow, I am bankrupt of ideas. So I'll just listen for yours instead.
Oh, is it? Well, it might be the same one that I was thinking, where it was make a musical out of a non-musical film.
Yes, we have done that before.
Son of a
that was
bitch.
the one I thought of.
I knew it. I was thinking about it for a second. I was like, wait a minute, we've definitely done this.
Have we done, can you take a musical and make it a non-musical? Have we gone that route?
I don't know. We'll do it anyways.
Hannah, you genius. Thank you for saving me at the last hurdle. For the record, if we had done the other question, I was going to say Zero Dark 30.
Great. Perfect.
I feel like we've absolutely done that question, because I feel like when we talked about The Little Mermaid, we talked about me wanting Thelma and Louise to be a musical.
Oh dear God, it was the last time
was
you
the
were.
last
It was the
time
last time you were on as well. Jesus Christ.
All right. So it was exactly a year ago. So some time has passed. But yeah, we
Mother
can.
God.
We can do the reverse of it if you have any thoughts.
Yes, please. Oh man, I would love to see a completely straight-laced Muppet movie. Just see where that goes.
Just like a serious Muppet. No.
Yeah.
So you're asking for the Happy Time Murders. So be very careful with your monkey's paw.
What the heck is that? What the heck is that?
That's that awful the thing that Brian Henson directed in the 2010s.
Oh God,
Melissa
oh
McCarthy
no,
is like a cop.
That's all you need to say.
I remember now. Oh God. Okay. Yep. I'm so sorry. I'll think of another answer. Y'all pick something.
that's okay. I was just like, be careful.
I
with
brought
it.
that evil into the world. Jesus. Yeah. No. Y'all pick one instead. Jesus.
I don't know. A lot of my favorite musicals I'm finding are based on things that didn't start out as musicals. Like my favorite musical bar one is Little Shop of Horrors. So it's like, so I'm trying to think of something that I like that I could do the inverse for.
I have my answer, which I think will be either very interesting or very upsetting to a lot of the musical theater community. I would love to see Rent
Ooh.
as a straight-laced movie. I think that would also be a very dark time for Mr. Jonathan Larson. Rest in peace. That was his last show, and he actually did not even get to see it open because he passed away right before it opened. So I think it'd be very disheartening to watch a straight-laced version of Rent. But I think the subject matter of it being set in the 90s in New York during the AIDS crisis and people trying to live and survive as artists, I think would make such a very interesting straight movie from a musical.
I can see that.
I could see it being nominated.
Be very depressing
For some awards. Just a bunch of bohemians.
Yeah.
The fighting interpersonal relationships and the angel. Yeah, I could see that going for something.
I do actually have an answer now, and unless you have one yet, Jake.
I'm struggling. I honestly don't.
It's fine. I can get mine.
Sure, go ahead.
I would love to see a non-musical version of Singing in the Rain, simply for two distinct reasons.
Are they never going to sing?
One, I understand the irony of that sentence. I guess just talking in the rain, but I would love it for one reason, because I do think that subject matter is actually really interesting. That transition into obviously the talking era of film and whatnot. Obviously, we've had The Artist, so that already kind of went into it some. But I think a more lighthearted form of it, apart from The Artist, would be kind of a good way to go about it. I'd love to be able to see that story done without having to rely on the song and dance numbers. And two, for the fact that the song and dance numbers are completely pointless in that movie. They're impressive, they're fun, they are completely unconnected to the film in near totality. And it's frustrating beyond belief watching it. Just make a movie with an actual plot that isn't half fucking around. It's so annoying.
So In the Rain.
So In the Rain, yes. Honestly, that's a good name for it. Yes, thank you, Hannah. That's genius.
In the Rain, Stewart's new
There's
musical.
a lot of implications there. That's a very
Non-musical.
That's a very dramatic, evocative title. I'm fine with that. I think the original has a lot of potential. It just wastes it by wasting her time. And no, I will not get off this soapbox no matter how many times I talk about it.
I did finally think of one, though, that I think is deliberately... I don't even know how much I would want to see this versus how much I would want to irritate people, but...
Oh, God bless you, Dick.
I think that a version of Xanadu that had absolutely no music in it whatsoever...
Wow.
Just none of the electric light orchestra stuff, none of the tubes stuff. It's just Olivia Newton-John in a nightclub doing her thing.
All right, fair. I wasn't expecting that of all answers. Imagine Cats without music.
It's a book of poems by T.S. Eliot that already exists.
Oh, really?
Yes, Andrew Lloyd Webber. Oh, shit. Don't quote me. I know it's a book of poems about cats from T.S. Eliot that Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote in the 1980s. He pulled it from T.S. Eliot.
Oh my God, that Fever Dream isn't even original? What a hack.
Does Andrew Lloyd Webber have any original that isn't based on something that already exists?
What's the Trains one?
Starlight Express.
Is that technically
I
original?
think it is.
Okay.
That might be the...
Imagine cats, but it's trains.
And people on roller
Personified
skates.
trains.
Yeah.
Okay,
people
well,
on
that
roller
probably
skates.
sucks. That because everything I was like, okay, Cats, The Phantom of the Opera, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dream, Jesus Christ
Color
Superstar, Jesus Christ Superstar is based on Jesus. So
Yeah. It's based off one of the most original works.
His most recent Bad Cinderella is about Cinderella.
Wow.
Huh.
So I'm looking it up right now about this book about cats.
Okay, well then everyone go see Andrew Lloyd Webber's train musicals, Fast Train, Slow Train, Smoking Trains. I don't know what it's called.
Jake, you just threw me for a loop with that one. I was just like, oh dear God, the reference.
Okay. It's based on the 1939... This is Cats, by the way. Based on the 1939 poetry collection Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats by T.S. Eliot.
That's a hell of a name.
And now I'm checking to make sure that Starlight Express is original. It does appear to be original.
Not a complete hack.
Musicals are weird, man.
Especially any musical written in the 1980s when everybody was doing cocaine.
Man, cocaine was the least of what they were doing when it came to the Starlight Express.
Well, we're in such a... As someone outside looking in from a stage perspective, it seems like we're in such a weird time where we've always had adaptations on the stage, but everything that I'm aware of that is new and coming out right now is based on something. Even just, I'm not even saying like right now, I mean like the past 5 or 6 years with the Grinch musical and the Back to the Future musical and the Texas Chainsaw musical, like everything that we're getting right now.
What?
Seems like I made the third one up, Stu, before you go into a tizzy.
Okay, because the first two I know are real, but I was like, I just, because you got to listen, man, I wouldn't put it past them.
I wouldn't either. Like I don't know.
Thank you for clarifying, though. I could have gone this entire the rest of my life, just believing that and just never confirming it.
I had to right a wrong.
Okay, there are some original stories on Broadway. Not very many, but there are some. The Book of Mormon is original.
Right, yeah.
Hey, let's
It is still running.
Matt Stone and Trey Parker.
technically based on the Book of Mormon, though.
Well, it's not
Okay, but not really.
entirely
But not
based.
really,
It's
no.
not like based on the book itself, really.
The story of Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Suffs, which is about the suffragette movement. That is original. Cabaret is on Broadway currently. It's in a revival moment right now.
That's nice.
But most of the other things that are on Broadway right now are either not original or revivals, are jukebox musicals, or pulled from other source material.
Damn, I should see that revival of Cabaret if I can ever get an off-Broadway. I love Cabaret. I want to rewatch Cabaret. Joel Grey, Liza Minnelli.
I've never seen it.
Fun movie.
There is a trending on TikTok. I know we just talked about the banes of social media and how it has been affecting this Mean Girls movie. There's a Ukrainian production of Cabaret right now that's all over my TikTok For You page, and it looks so good. But right now, the one that they have in Cabaret is actually more of or the one in Cabaret, the one in New York, is an immersive experience. So it's like Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club. And so like no phones are allowed inside whatsoever. Like you have to put it away. They like darken the whole lobby to make it more like a club experience, to feel like a more immersive cabaret experience. And I believe right now, tying this whole thing together, Adam Lambert is playing the MC, and Alii Craivayo is playing Sally Bowles.
Not familiar with the
So,
second
road
person.
trip to New York?
She just played Janice in the remake of Mean Girls.
Oh, did she? I did not recognize the name. Excellent.
Oh,
Alii Craivayo.
circle, baby.
Full circle.
That's how we do it. I think we've topped it there.
Yeah.
If you'd care to do socials, my friend.
I will. So go ahead and subscribe and follow us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on things like Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Podbay, Podomatic, Stitcher. Again, iHeartRadio, YouTube, but we're hosted by Spotify for podcasters. Go ahead and send us an email, theyremadeit@gmail.com, with thoughts about episodes that we might be able to do in the future, things you hated about the podcast, things you liked about the podcast, or if you just want to say hi. And go ahead and follow us on social media. We're at It Remade on Twitter and bluesky.social. And we are on, it's at Remade on Twitter and theyremadeit.bluesky.social on Bluesky. That's it. We post updates on when podcast episodes are going live, things that we might be able to cover in the future, diagrams I put together that are full circles about folks we've talked about on the podcast more than once, and, posters and promo art for what we've been watching, reading, listening to, playing, etc. And that is it for socials.
Also, please email them and tell them that you want me back on the podcast again. I know I said it last year, but tell them again.
Listen, I'm reminded every time I do an episode, it feels like. You're like, hey, when you do a thing I can do with it, hang out with you.
Not every time, but there's definitely movies that I want to do. And
you can
get to them.
You can visit us anytime you want, and it doesn't have to be a musical, but Lord knows there are tons of musicals we can cover. I've been putting together an omnibus on Google Sheets that I'm migrating everything over to, and I'm like, good Lord, I forgot how many things we could keep this show going until we die. Like
Hooray!
No shortage of things to cover.
You'll never be rid of us, fuckers. Please keep listening to us. We love you.
You always antagonize people at the end of the show.
That's why you need me to be on the show, because I tell the listeners that I love them very much and I appreciate them listening, and I'm not going to harass them to keep listening.
Listen, confrontation, it engages people. It encourages people to engage. They need an enemy. It may as well be me.
Very brave.
I'm living with the enemy in my home.
Oh dear God, that's as hard a line as ever to go out on.
Very. Isn't that a movie?
Oh, probably.
The Sleeping with the Enemy, isn't that a Julia Roberts movie?
Probably.
Honestly, that sounds familiar. Maybe there's a remake. We'll get to it.
Okay.
We'll get to it next year or the year after or something. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe never. We're here until we die. As always, I am your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
And I'm your special guest host, Hannah.
We hope you have a very happy holidays, and we will see you again next year after our little end of the year chat. Have a good night, everybody.
For too long, and
Why is he so huge and obnoxious?
Candy cane grounds.
Okay, hurry up.
Taylor Zimmerman, 2 for you. Glen Coco, 4 for you, Glen Coco. You go, Glen Coco. And Caddy Heron. Do we have a Caddy Heron here?
It's Katie.
Oh, Katie, here you go. 1 for you. And none for Gretchen Wieners. Bye.